We are live. Good evening and welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show with Mark Wallace and Charles Thomas, right here on intellectualradio.com. And we're streaming live at Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and on X, on all of these social media outlets. So we appreciate you tuning in with us. Hey, Charles.
Hey, man, I'm having a good time tonight. Lots to talk about. As you mentioned, we are on Intellectual Radio, on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. All of them. We got it covered now.
We got it all covered. We got it all covered. So, last week you were talking about, if you remember, the report that you read in, I think it was CWB or something like that,
Yeah, the
about
website.
the city's so-called clearance
Right.
report, and saying that they had a, was it 90% clearance or something
Or
like that?
53%, but a lot higher than it actually is.
Yeah. So, uh, and so I put a couple of phone calls out because there was a commander that I like to talk to try to get some real understanding of what's going on. And I was told that Snelling retracted that
Yes.
report,
Yes.
and apologized for putting out the misinformation or the report. Is that correct?
Right. I read a story where the police superintendent did issue a correction. He said, in fact, only three of the homicides in January had actually been solved. And the report was misleading because it included homicides that had been solved, that had been committed years ago, as many as 20 years ago, that some had been solved, and they counted them among the solved homicides in January, which was uh, it's pretty obvious to me that it was a gross misinterpretation of the statistics and what they truly mean. Actually, I think the city runs about 15 to 20% in terms of resolved homicides normally. I don't know what the actual rate was for last year, but it certainly was not 53%.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that they came out and it at least acknowledged that they had put out information that was not true. Because for the longest, that has been the ongoing question as to why is Chicago have the lowest clearance of homicide in the country. Um, and while the national average, I think, is 62 or 67%, and Chicago has been somewhere between 15 and 18%, um, which leads me to a lot of questions about these so-called shot spotters and this other technology that I've been reading in the papers. And of course, it's almost time to either uh, trash or sign the new contract to extend the contract. Um, and of course, Brandon has said that he wanted to do away with it. Now, we found out that some of those contracts, right, when they say that the mayor has signed the contract, some of that is computer generated signatures that because it has already been voted upon and passed or whatever, there's some other office within the government that signs those checks or sign those contracts. So there was some confusion about whether Brandon had actually signed the contract himself or even was aware of it.
Well, I
And
mean, I think the shot spotter only tells you where a shot has been fired. It does not investigate the crime. It can be a valuable tool, I would think, if you knew exactly when and where a shot was fired. Then the police, of course, show up and begin their investigation. Brandon Johnson, I think, more effectively or potentially more effectively wanted to hire 200 additional detectives at the Chicago Police Department to investigate crimes. That I thought was going to be his primary effort toward increasing the number of resolved cases in the city, hire more detectives. I haven't heard much more about that since he made that proposal during the campaign.
Well, you know, yeah, I haven't heard much more about that, but the accuracy of the shot spotter, it's confusing to me because I'm told that the spotter, they have these cameras and they have this room where you have some civilians as well as police trained officers that are looking at these cameras, and the cameras can tell them exactly where the shot was fired. And they could go to these cameras and they could look at these cameras and sometimes determine or see a physical person within the projectile of that
Mhm.
camera.
Right.
But the problem is that I read a story in the Reader this weekend, um, which was the second story that talks about the inaccuracy of these shot spotters. And for me, it's, you know, it really reverts back to a return on investment. We're spending all this money to a private company, but what is the return? I haven't seen anything in any article or any data that said that the shot spotter has led to resolutions, or apprehensions or convictions of people who were shot. But the information that I see in these articles is that, in fact, in the 10th district, in the article that I read, it showed where there were a significant amount of shots recorded or shots fired, but never picked up by the shot spotter.
Yeah. Eh, you know, it's technology, but bottom line, the problem with criminal investigations, particularly homicide investigations in Chicago, is the unwillingness of witnesses to come forward and to work with the police. There is a culture in Chicago that is anti-snitch. People don't snitch in Chicago, and that is a bigger part of the problem than the shot spotter system. Now, we do spend money on the shot spotter system that might be spent better. But I think at some point, and I think most police officers would agree, that people simply don't talk in the city of Chicago, particularly in the neighborhoods where the shootings are occurring.
Well, I think that I think they're doing a little more talking now because they now have these $15,000, what do they call them? Um, Whistleblower payments that they are giving to people that lead to arrest and convictions of people. So, and I think that was instituted either last year or the year before
By
last.
whom?
I think that was under the Brown, um, under his jurisdiction.
But was there some private benefactor?
I don't know how the funds are generated. If it's a combination of coming from private donations as
Must
well as
be.
from
I could not imagine the city coming up or giving away money like that, even for a witness to come forward. Uh, Generally, those reward situations come from private sources. I got to think that I'm not sure, but I got to think that some private agency is doing that. Did you hear about this new effort on the part of the business community to provide money for anti-violence activities? This would be in addition to what to CRED, which is what Arnie Duncan does. This was a new fund that was set up by the business community to work on violence in the city. $200 million, I think, is the goal to raise.
Well, I again, that's another area that I always have questions about. What are we getting for this so-called violence intervention, where we're spending millions of tax dollars into these groups, but what are we getting for those dollars? What's the outcomes? We don't see any statistics. We just are putting money out there, but we see no kinds of reports of outcomes for the money that we're putting in these so-called violent intervention programs. Now, to me, violent intervention program is a good school, good jobs available, something to do, and a holistic program for communities. That to me is good violent intervention. But to have some groups that are primarily in Black communities and Hispanic communities, because white communities don't have violent intervention organizations. We just have them in Black communities and Hispanic communities, but I don't know what we get for them because I have yet to see a report of any data that showed that that's what these groups are doing. I hear people say that they have, neutralized some, some factions, but I don't know of any. I don't know what we're getting for that. I mean, there
Well,
was $40 million one year under the Quinn administration, $48 million that went into a black hole that we still don't know anything about where
oh,
it went.
I know exactly where that money went. That was money that was given to public service organizations who, in an unspoken way, were to support Pat Quinn's reelection for governor. Every time there's an incumbent governor, they will pass a program that will provide money for the public, what do they call them, public service, or the charities, and the charities will all come get their money, and they'll all support the incumbent governor. That's the way Chicago has always done business. And Quinn, I think, got into some minor trouble. He didn't no criminal situations, but he got called out on it. But it didn't make any difference. That's what they do on election year, and they will do it in 2026. When there's a governor's race, you'll find some program where they're going to give all these charities, these 501c3s will get all this money. There'll be a grant program available. They'll get the money, and their leadership will, in effect, work for the incumbent in Chicago. The Republicans probably do it too. It's just that we haven't had a Republican governor in a while, but this is what they do in Illinois. That's how they roll.
Yeah, so it just concerns it's a problem to me because it seems like we have it's almost like an auto show. They have conventions of people who have technology that they want to sell to governments because they want to make money, and they bring these people in from these governments and they say, hey, this is the way that you can generate millions of dollars and not call it another tax on your people, but you can disguise it as public safety, like they are trying to institute. And I wrote to Brandon that I thought it was a dumb idea that they're trying to now institute this ticketing program downtown where you live. And they want to, or you live in the South Loop, but not South Loop, but West
Loop. Yeah.
West Loop. But it's where you live is in a part of that territory that they now want to put cameras on buses and city vehicles to ticket people who are parked, quote unquote, in bike lanes. Now, the people who are going to get hit by this are going to be delivery workers, seniors who might be dropping off another senior who can't walk far distances. It's going to be people who are just trying to get from point A to point B that are going to get hit with these tickets. Plus the fact they still, even that they said that they're going to institute it, they're not certain what technology actually works, but they're talking about that they voted it. Well, of course, this was voted in under the Lightfoot administration, but they've been trying to figure out how to get it implemented, and now they're saying they're going to implement it in June. Just another scheme
Well, yeah,
to
to raise money.
to raise money that we probably will get very little of, and the largest portion of that will probably go to the vendor or the owners of the equipment. So we just keep going around um, in these circles to pay companies off for which the citizens get no benefit from that, and that's just extraordinarily frustrating to me that here we are doing the same thing, in particular since Brandon, like Lightfoot, who said that he wasn't going to use these tickets, fines, and fees um, that disproportionately target the most vulnerable people in the city. But
Let me ask you something.
yeah,
They did a survey, I'm sorry about that, but there was a survey completed recently that showed that Brandon Johnson had only a 25%, 30%, a very low approval rating. I mean, you were a supporter of his. How's he doing?
I'm still a supporter. I'm still a supporter of his, and I'm having I'm hopeful that he's still got 3 years to get and do some solid things that we all can say that he's going in the right trajectory. I just, again, those polls and that sort of thing, I don't pay a lot of attention to it, but um, there are some things that I wish they would be more transparent about, so that we would know, so that we could have a better idea of the direction that they're going. I don't think that there's enough clarity right now, even though there's significant challenges. But I'm still on board with him in that I want him to be successful. But I'm going to push back when I see things that I just don't think that are benefiting us. I'm not this loyalist, that is not going to say, hey, you're going down the wrong street
Well,
just because I'm
yeah,
supporting you.
I didn't support him in the election, but I am pulling for him to be successful. I haven't seen much evidence of that so far, but I would agree with you. I think at this point he gets an incomplete because it's really too early, less than a year. He's only been in office, what, 9, 10 months now?
Right.
Not 9 months. So, yeah, I mean, it's way too early. I think when he gets to his 1 year mark, there's going to be an assessment of how he's doing. I think we've got a very eventful summer coming up in Chicago with the Democrat National Convention and all that will entail for the city, both from a security standpoint and from a political standpoint. This is going to be a very eventful year. A lot's going to happen this year, and we'll see how Brendan does. I mean, I don't think he's doing very well nationally in terms of his image, because I think the city has had quite a few problems, particularly as it pertains to the migrant situation. But you can go to a half dozen cities around the country who are having the same problems trying to manage all the migrants.
Well, yes. I'm not concerned about, national, ratings. I'm really concerned about what you do here at home, and how effective it is for improving things for the future of the city of Chicago. And, I think that we have to, you know, we have to look for people in government who can collaborate ideas that are going to be futuristic for the city of Chicago, that is going to be better for the city as a whole, and certainly better for the communities that have been disadvantaged disproportionately for so long. We need a urban planning department, which we haven't had for decades. We haven't had a real urban planning department. We have these people who put in these one-off developments that don't connect anything with anything other than, you have this one Starbucks here and somebody's supposed to get excited about that. But that's not real urban planning. So we need a real urban planning department. We need people who are tenured and experienced in doing urban planning so that we can have, the big picture that's going to something that we can measure 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. But if we're going to continue of the same behavior of the past administrations, it will be a failed administration 4 years later if we're continuing with those same idea. I am hoping that in my brief discussions with his aides that they are putting together plans that will be dramatically different going forward, that will help the city move in the right direction of being successful for all, reducing violence, reducing crime, reducing unemployment, reducing poverty, all of those things, and lowering taxes by increasing the tax base, by expanding the tax base, by putting more people to work. We shall see if that happens.
Haven't seen it so far. I mean, it just has not happened. So moving ahead to talk for a minute about the situation, the news that broke last week that the president was vindicated from any wrongdoing in this business of taking classified documents out of the White House. But man, what a horrible way to be vindicated for a sitting politician, a sitting president who's running for re-election. I'm saying that this special counsel reported that Joe Biden was so forgetful that he could not really, it wasn't worth prosecuting him for taking classified documents from his vice presidency because he is so forgetful. And I think he was described as was it feeble old man or elderly man with a poor memory. And this is the guy who basically is the so-called, as they say, leader of the free world, who has his, is always within 3 or 4 feet of the buttons that could in the world. And he doesn't have all of his faculties. Did you buy that? I had questions about why that was even in the special counsel's report.
It was the height of unprofessionalism. It was the special counsel did a James Comey all over again. It was, and Merrick Garland should fire that special counsel. Hold on, let me just finish. He should be fired for that. His job was to speak to the legality of this. It was a cheap shot that he took that has put him with zero credibility whatsoever. This is why people have a problem with trusting the Department of Justice for things that are done like this. This was a political cheap shot.
Well, even if it was, I think the Republicans in one chamber or the other, they want to see the transcripts of the interviews with the president, with Joe Biden, to find out exactly what this guy is talking about. I'd love to see those transcripts as well, because, and I also would like to know, did Merrick Garland see this report before it was issued? Who saw it before it was issued? Did this guy just make this report? Nobody got a chance to look at it in the Justice Department.
When you're appointed as a special counsel, you have complete autonomy. That's the difference. You have complete autonomy. You don't have to report to the Attorney General when you're appointed as a special counsel. And he took the liberty to take this cheap shot.
Well, I don't know that it was a cheap shot. I can see the man.
Oh, it was
And
pure and
stop,
simple
stop, stop, stop,
a
Mark.
cheap shot.
Let me finish, Mark. I can see the man and see the mistakes and the gaffes that he makes. I can see him shuffling along as he's walking. He is clearly an elderly man. And and it's not just me. I think that a lot of people
Everybody knows that.
wait, Mark, let me finish. People see that Joe Biden is not the Joe Biden of 5, 10 years ago, even. They see he has these frailties. I know you don't like the surveys, but a vast majority of even Democrats say that he's too old to be president. They say the same thing about Donald Trump. So I'm not going to make this a partisan situation. They say the same things about him. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that this special counsel was basically telling the Americans what they needed to hear, because there aren't medical reports that we're getting. This guy spent time with Joe Biden and said that he has even forgotten the years that he was president, he was vice president of the United States. I, people are beginning to wonder, this could be the thing that takes him off the ticket this year and forces the Democrats to do something else when it comes to running for president. I've said it here before. I don't think he's going to make it, quite frankly. And I don't know that Donald Trump is going to make it because he's got so many legal problems right now. We could be looking at two different people than Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And I think right now there's less a chance that Joe Biden will be on the ticket in the fall.
Joe Biden will be the nominee for the presidency for the Democratic Party, and more than likely Donald Trump will be the nominee for the Republican Party. These are the two people we would have. I will be fully and on board, and in the coming months we'll be talking about all of the accomplishments that this 80-year-old, more wise, more experienced politician has gotten done for the country and moving the country in the right direction in the months to come. That's what people are going to be making a determination on. The Republicans and all of those who are anti-Biden will just use all of those talking points because they don't have anything else to run on. The Republicans don't have a record. They don't have a plan. So the only thing they could do is call names. We will be supporting the president for re-election in 2024, talking about the things that he's gotten done, that he's been able to get Congress to do, to move the country in the direction that it's going, cooling off inflation, creating economic stability, creating job opportunities, and so on and so. We're going to be talking about his record, and that's what people are going to be making a decision on in November of 2024, and they will at that time determine that they do not want to go back to the ridiculousness of Trump, who just wants to be an entertainer. And the people who want for him to go into office so that they could have free reign to do whatever it is that they want to do, and he just signs off on it. But I'm not concerned with that rhetoric at all, because that's all it is.
Well, I think I look at the immigration situation, the fact that he's got the United States either financing or firing weapons in 4 different conflicts now. Of course, there's the economy, where your dollar's not doing what it used to do. And of course, going back to what started this conversation, the fact that this guy, quite frankly, I don't think has got the cognitive abilities or physical abilities for that matter, to lead this country, particularly as he goes into his 80s. He'll be 82 if he were reelected in November. He'll be 82 when he takes office or shortly thereafter. And I just don't think he can make it. And I think that he's not, out of the 345 million Americans, the one who should be leading at this point in his life. I'm just very curious to see what's going to happen this summer. It's going to be a very eventful summer because even if he is renominated, that's going to be one heck of a story around the world. He also, I think from a foreign policy standpoint, has alienated the United States from what, 80, 90% of the rest of the world with this foreign
I don't know where
policy.
you get.
So,
I don't know where you get that from. But
where do you? I get it from the fact that
Well,
the vast majority of people in this planet live in Asia and Africa. They don't live in Europe. They don't live in the United States and Canada. They live in South America, Asia, Africa. You're talking 85% of the people on this planet, black and brown people, by the way, they are outraged, particularly by what's going on in Gaza right now, and that the United States is supplying the weapons. I'm sure we might want to talk about that interview. I don't know if you watched it with Vladimir Putin that was done last week. Vladimir Putin has the support of the majority of people on the planet, right or wrong. I'm not making a judgment about that, but the United States under Joe Biden's leadership has alienated itself from the vast majority of people in this world, man. And that's what's happened over these past 3.5 years. This guy, he's got to go. I mean, he served his time. He's just got to go. And that I don't think he's going to be there in November. I think there's going to be somebody else.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
We disagree on that. And I don't know where you come. I don't know where those statistics come from, but he certainly has brought the NATO back together and made it stronger than it's ever been.
Really?
And
you believe that?
Yeah. No,
it's
a fact. It's a fact.
They're getting their clock cleaned in Ukraine, man.
Let me. Well, first of all, maybe you should have been on the interview today with a seasoned veteran reporter who has lived in Russia and Ukraine for 26 years.
Tell me about that. You don't have any clips you can play, huh?
Well, no, because it was a full recording, and I wanted for us.
I'm sorry I didn't. I'm sorry I didn't watch
to do it together. But what I will do is we're not going to play it tonight because it's an hour and 25 minutes. It went much longer than the discussion went much longer. He said he will come back and give us updates, and hopefully, we all three could be there. In fact, there was a black journalist that he suggested that would be someone that we could talk to who also lives in Ukraine to help us to understand better of what is going on. But he did say that, and I know that people think that Putin is winning. He did say that Putin will lose this war. Ukraine is not going to surrender to Russia. Russia is having serious issues with its equipment and replenishing its stockpiles, and there is not going to be a Russia, Soviet, or taking over Moscow taking over Ukraine. Russia will not be the ultimate takeover of Ukraine. It might have some small territories, but Russia will lose this war. And I think what we'll do is you and I will do another, if we've got time later on in the week, we'll do another show where we will play his interview, and then we'll be able to talk about it. But he says he is going to come back and share with us and give us some updates. Now, with respect to what some would like to refer to as an interview, I refer to it as just a bunch of babbling, and where, Putin just, took his lunch. I mean, both of them was not a good look for either one of them. In fact, the reporter that we're talking about, his name is Philip Ittner. Philip Ittner, you can, if you want to follow him, you can follow him on Twitter at Philip Ittner, and you could get more of the work that he's doing over in Ukraine. But he said that it was not a good look for any of them. Said that Tucker Carlson sat there and just they were rambling all over each other, and it was just a big babble session. He didn't ask him any real serious questions. That would have been, fair questions within an interview. But he basically dealt with somebody that he could control, who had no experience. He's not a journalist, certainly not a serious journalist, that have the kinds of experience to be able to deal with that kind of international issue, and a person like Putin, which is why Putin haven't dealt with any real journalists in years, because he knows that they will push him to the brink to having to respond to serious questions. That's why he dealt with Carlton Tucker, or whatever his name, or Tucker Carlson, and he wouldn't deal with a serious journalist.
You finished? Are you finished?
Yeah.
They say that 200 million people around the world have seen that interview or parts of it, including about over 100 million on Twitter. That's around the world. I as a literate American citizen, I think of myself as that. I want to hear what the other side has to say. I'm not going to rate the interviewer. I'm going to rate the interviewee. I want to hear what he has to say. I don't know if all he said was true, but I wanted to hear it. And the problem that we have in the U.S. media, the mainstream media in this country, your Fox, your MSNBC, CNN, CBS, ABC, NBC, places where I used to work, is that now they don't allow us to get the information. They want to filter information for us. I wanted to hear what Putin had to say, and I would hope that our viewers, that they want to hear what Putin has to say, and they won't rate the interviewer. They'll rate the interviewee. What did he say? He said that there was a peace agreement that was negotiated in Istanbul, Turkey, about a year ago, and that the Ukrainians signed off on it. But the Americans and the British, thinking that they could defeat the Russians, they were the ones who got in the way of that peace agreement. Since then, over 500,000 people have died. Who has benefited from it? The U.S. weapons manufacturers. The U.S. weapons manufacturers, that is the number one industry that we have in this country. We export weapons all over the world. They want, right now the Congress is trying to decide whether to spend another $60 billion in Ukraine. And it's a hopeless cause, but not for the weapons manufacturers. That's $60 billion that Ukraine, we might send it to Ukraine, but they will immediately send it back. This is a massive money laundering proposition, what's going on over there. And Joe Biden is sitting back and letting it happen. Keep in mind that Biden was also the guy who left $85 billion worth of weapons in Afghanistan. Can you see what's going on? You see the pattern? This administration is laundering money to the weapons industry. And it's high time that Americans understood that. What's going on? Who's benefiting from this? Not the Ukrainians. They're being slaughtered. They're being slaughtered. They're losing. Anybody who tells you they're winning, look at the map. See the fact that the Russians are occupying 20% of their country, the 20% that is Russian speaking, that the Russians say is historically Russian. They're occupying it now and they're not going to give it back. But we want to continue sending weapons over there because that's going to continue to make money for people in the weapons manufacturing industry in this country. And people are falling for it because people like MSNBC, CNN, Fox, CBS, and ABC are not telling you the truth about what's going on. And Putin, if anything, has the support of the majority of the world. Why do we care about Ukraine? Really? They're saying that in 15 to 20 years, the vast majority of people in this country will be, number one, people of color, as they call them, from places other than Europe. So why should we care so much about what goes on in Europe? Only because of NATO and the weapons manufacturers who want to sell guns, airplanes, tanks, and such. Now, man, connect the dots, please.
Yeah, well, I am connecting the dots, but I'm connecting a different set of dots than you're connecting, and I'm certainly not going to take the lead from the likes of Vladimir Putin. I don't know where you get this idea that the majority of the world supports him, but hey, if that does it for you, so be it. I'm not going to argue with that because I don't. There's no data anywhere. There's no proof of that anywhere that supports that. But if that gets it for you, hey, live with it.
Go to Google. Go to Google and Google BRICS. It's called BRICS. It is a new alliance, a counterpart to NATO. See who's involved in BRICS. That stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Yeah,
there are other countries that are involved as well. Russia is the lead actor in BRICS right now.
Yeah, and
this year Russia is leading BRICS.
Yeah, well, that tells me everything that I need to know about that source. And if you take that source's credibility, hey, more power to you.
That's not a source. That's BRICS. It's not a source. It's an organization that is counterbalanced to NATO.
Led by Russia. Okay.
Led by Russia.
Exactly.
Yes.
As you said,
this
by
year.
Vladimir Putin. But
I guess he leads Russia. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. Well,
look it up, folks.
I won't take any credibility from that. Just like I don't take any credibility from what he said in that so-called interview that he just had the lunch of Tucker Carlson. But anyway, so that was I guess entertaining for the 200 million people that you say that watch the sideshow. How many people watched the Super Bowl and were entertained by that?
More of them watch Vladimir Putin. Apparently,
okay.
That's
all right.
Well,
they like the sideshow. But look, I am not a proponent of war. We have a military industrial system in place that a lot of American people work and have jobs as a result of. A lot of the equipment that is going is old equipment, stockpiles that's been sitting around for years doing nothing, which is in a lot of those packages that are going over to Ukraine and places like Israel, because it's equipment that we've had, stockpiles that we've done nothing with, have not used. And it's not like we're not getting our money back. We're not giving money away. This money will be returned to the country. I know that people like to talk about spending, but when we support these allies, this money doesn't go into a dark hole. We get the money back over time. Ukraine will pay us back. Israel will pay us back. But unfortunately, we live in a world where there are people like Vladimir Putin and Xi what is it, Chang or whatever, that want to do harm to other people because they're just thugs and bullies. So unfortunately, we have these situations where, you know, we have a military, which is why we have a military. I would prefer not to have to put our men and women in conflicts at all. And all that we could do to support another country to stop a bully, uh, I I I support that, and I hope that they will come to a successful end sooner than later. But it will be successful. It just depends on how soon or how later that is going to happen. That's what my hope is. I don't want to have to put any American men or women um, at risk in another conflict at all.
Well, the money will come back, that's for sure. It'll go to Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, all these companies that make these incredible weapons. As far as supporting bullies are concerned, I remember we supported South Vietnam against that bully North Vietnam. We've supported bullies before. I mean, protected other countries without much success in the past. But again, a lot of people made a lot of money, and we'll see what happens. They're running out of time in Ukraine, though. I don't know that they're going to get this money that they want for Ukraine. It'll be a tough sell at this point. You know, they just fired the general who was the head of the Ukrainian armed forces. He just got fired in Ukraine, so things are rather unstable there. And they're talking about sending $60 billion to a place that generally is very unstable right now. And they're drafting people as old as 50 years old to go fight. Did your guy tell you about that? Did he talk about that at all?
Yes, it did.
That
Mhm.
they're running out of soldiers, and they're going to have to come up with something. I hope that the United States doesn't send any of our young people over there to defend Ukraine. I mean, there's a lot of other places that I would send soldiers if I had to send them than Ukraine. Why is Ukraine or Europe so important to
The,
people here in the
the
United States? What's going on?
Yeah, the United States are not sending soldiers over to
No,
Ukraine,
they aren't.
and I
Not
think
yet. But
Zelensky has the ability to make sure that he has the right people in place, and if that person wasn't the right person, then he replaces them. That doesn't mean that they're unstable. So I have confidence that, and the people of Ukraine have confidence in Zelensky, and that he's not going to relent to the likes of Vladimir Putin, and neither are the people of Ukraine, based on the conversation that I had with Philip Ittner earlier today. It was just a great learning experience, and I look forward to sharing that with the people so that they have a better understanding. We're going to be talking to other journalists who live and work in that area, who are experts at studying those types of conflicts that could better help us to understand why it's important for Ukraine to be successful, and why it's important not to allow for the likes of Vladimir Putin to destroy Ukraine and to take control of Ukraine. So if people don't understand it, there is people in place who could help us to understand that. But it's the right thing to do, and I think that eventually Congress will do the right thing, because there are Republicans that are reasonable people who see that this is an important thing to do internationally, and they will eventually support that. Coming back home to the home front, we had another shooting in at the Lakewood Church.
oh, you mean
Joel
in
Osteen
Houston? In
in
Houston.
Houston.
I thought we were
Yeah,
talking Chicago. Yeah.
yeah, a 36-year-old woman took a 7-year-old child. Whether it's unclear whether it was now it's unclear whether it was her child or a child. At first, they said it was her child that she took in to the Lakewood Church, and shot two and injured two people. but she was immediately taken out. And she had this long weapon. I would assume that they said it was a long rifle. I don't
No,
know. If
I watched some report this afternoon. I don't know which network it was on. They said that she had an AK-47. No, I'm sorry, an AR-15 rifle, which is
Right.
that
Okay.
modified assault rifle.
That semi-automatic
Yes.
weapon. So, but thankfully, it was not worse than it was, and I guess they are more information is coming out about what her motives were. To that, there's some saying that she had a sign on the gun that said Palestine on the gun, but all of the information hasn't come out as to the investigation of what her motivation was to go into the Lakewood Church.
Joel Osteen, the Joel Osteen's church. That's
Yeah, I know
Joel
Joel
Osteen.
Osteen.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, I mean, he's bigger than the Lakewood Church. I think people probably would identify more his church. Yes, a couple. Apparently, he hired off-duty Houston police officers as security at the church, and they were the ones who took this person down.
Yeah. Yeah, just a very unfortunate situation. Again, people have access to these weapons. I read a report. No, it wasn't a report that I read. I was looking at Face the Nation, and they were talking about the 12% reduction in firearm deaths around the country as a result of the bipartisan gun bill that was put into place. Certainly not strong enough, but every little bit helps. And hopefully we can get to the point where we ban these semi-automatic and assault weapons again, and we can reduce and all but eliminate these types of occurrences that seem to be happening almost frequently, seemingly like it's monthly that it's happening here in this country, because people want to talk about banning books and being in the middle of somebody else's medical decisions, but don't want to do real work that's going to protect people from, you can't even go to church. You can't even go to your synagogue. You can't go to your mosque without being under the threat of somebody coming in and gunning you down. It's pretty sickening, pretty sickening. And then the report came out about the young man who Goodloe, what's his name? Isaac Goodloe out in Carroll Stream, who was having some mental challenges, and the police went in, and apparently they showed the family, and the attorney said some edited version of the body cams, and it's looking like we're probably going to see another horrific situation where somebody was having a mental breakdown that should have been addressed by a crisis intervention trained group of people, rather than just sending people in with guns blazing.
Is that what happened?
That's what
They went in with guns blazing.
that seems to be what's being reported.
Well, I don't do seams. I mean, I don't know what happened, but I don't know, man. I mean, we went from Houston, and in Texas right now, they're saying that the reason this woman didn't do what she could have done is because there were armed people in the church. Now, I don't know. I go to church every Sunday, but I don't know that there are any armed people in my church to guard it. Yours? I don't.
No,
Well,
no. No.
I think it's like, what do you do? Have we reached a point where we need armed guards in churches?
No, we reached a point to where our government needs to do its job and do something about eliminating the easy access to these weapons to do the kind of carnage that we are seeing done
Yeah.
over and over and over and over and over again. That's what we
Yeah.
that's what we need.
There are there are probably, I don't know how many more, but several times more people who were killed with handguns over the weekend around the country than with AK-47s. And I'm not saying that you don't ban AK-47s. I mean, that's above my pay grade to talk about. But if you want to know who's getting killed by guns, it's people using handguns. And perhaps there should be a thought about that in terms of whether or not we're going to control death and injury caused by firearms. And that, of course, is going to mean uh, we have to repeal the Second Amendment. And the people that like to talk about gun control, they need to just take the bull by the horns and just do it. This is one of the few countries in the world that I wouldn't support a ban on the Second Amendment. But if people really want to go after firearms and to stop the carnage of firearms, maybe they should just go take the bull by the horns and see what people really think about it, and put together a movement to repeal the Second Amendment. I would fight against it. I mean, I support the Second Amendment, but this piecemeal business, it just divides people even more. Let's have a vote. Let's have a vote state by state. Let's get to 2/3 of the states to ratify the amendment and deal with it, and see what happens. Personally, I don't think Americans would go for it because they would see what the real issue is here, and it's not protection from crazy people. We need to work on the middle state of our country, but we the guns are not the problem. It's the people that are using them, and that includes Pee Wee out west, as well as this woman who walked into the church with an assault rifle. If you really want to deal with it, but what do you give up when you do that? You give up your right to protect yourself from the government, and that's why it was put there. And quite frankly, looking at the state of America's government, I think you're a person is. It takes some wisdom to have some way to protect yourself in this kind of unstable environment that we have in the United States.
Well, the government is abandoning or abdicating its responsibility for making sure that all citizens, more than 85% of people, including gun owners, want for there to be a more restrictive and accountable gun policies in place, including gun owners. And it's not the Second Amendment that's the problem. It's the bastardization of the Second Amendment that is the problem. And the problem that they have unleashed semi-automatic weapons, including AK-47s and AR-14s, on
15
society, AR-15s, and AK-47s and semi-automatic handguns and handguns that with switchers on them that could be modified, which are semi-automatic that are now modified to operate like machine guns. So it is the abdication of the responsibility of the people in place to do what they can do, that refuse to do anything about it. It's not about taking anybody's ability to protect themselves in the first place away from them. You can do both. You can give people their false sense of security of protecting themselves so they can have their gun and in their home, where you're 3 times more likely to die from your own gun than somebody to invade your home and come in and kill you. Those are facts. Well, we've had now 4,700 people this year, 4,701 people so far to date to now to die as a result of gun violence deaths. 2,838 of those were suicide. That's not the government warring and mounting up against people killing people. That's people having access to weapons, killing themselves. Unfortunately, we have this sick, ideology that we just got to have a gun in this country where we're 4% of the world's population and have 40% of the world's guns. No other developed nation is experiencing what we're experiencing and don't have near the kinds of access to guns than we have. I mean, it's, a ridiculous scare tactics that people like to put out there that has no basis in truth whatsoever about the government going to attack the country. And so people need to have access to these military style weapons to go around blowing up mosques, temples, and churches and slaughtering people because they have some grievance or some mental incapacity to deal with whatever their frustrations are. And we have people in government who just say, well, that's just collateral damage, or minimizing it to suggest that somehow get rid of the Second Amendment and that'll do away with the problem. We don't have to do that because, this is a problem that has proliferated itself in the last 25 years, where 2% of all semi-automatic weapons were 2% of all gun sales were semi-automatic weapons and AR-15s 25 years ago. Today, they're 25% of all gun sales. So this has been a situation that has proliferated itself in the last 25 years because they have unleashed semi-automatic weapons and allowed just to say, hey, anybody can have access to them. Reverse that and we'll reverse this carnage.
Yeah, suicide is a mental health problem in this reporter's view. And, again, the big slaughter is with handguns and more so than AR-15s. There are a lot of people in the world who wish they had an AR-15 to protect themselves. The United States is not someplace that's going to be around forever and ever and ever. I mean, there are revolutions that happen. Governments become unstable. Governments attack their own people. I could imagine that there are parts of Ukraine and Gaza where people wish they had an AR-15. There's no guarantee that the United States is always going to be this very safe, relatively very safe place when it comes to the world. And it's a dilemma. It's a dilemma. You're in a country that was founded in violence, forged in gunfire. The place where you're sitting right now, Mark, was once peopled by people that needed guns to defend themselves. And the very space that you're occupying right now was taken away from from somebody who owned it by somebody with a gun. That's the story of the United States. And so gun violence has been around in this country since its very beginning. That's how.
Not at the level that we have gun violence today.
Oh, you know what happened? Wait. Do you know what happened on the Great Plains? The slaughter of Native Americans? How do you think that happened? You think they were killing the Native Americans, millions of them, with bows and arrows? No, they used guns. This country was forged in gunfire. You can't get away from it. It was forged in gunfire. This is how it happened. Where you're sitting right now was fought over by people with guns. It's true.
We had people who came here and took land from people that
Exactly,
didn't
and they
belong to
took
them.
it,
So
and they
that
took
doesn't
it
mean
with guns. They took it with guns,
well,
man.
that doesn't
What can
justify
you do?
that to
Yeah,
have
no, of course it
military
doesn't.
style
But
weapons
my
in the
point
hands
is,
of civilians.
my point is that people in this country, in this culture, in America, they know the value of a gun. The gun can mean life
No,
or
they
death,
don't. No, they don't.
whether you have land or you don't have
They
land.
don't know the
It's
value of the
it's
gun.
it's ingrained in the culture of this country. And
No, it's not ingrained in the culture of the country.
I'm not bragging about it, but that's the fact.
No,
That's
it's not
how
ingrained in the
land
culture of the country
that's
because
how
the
land
guns that are
was
owned,
gained and lost in this country in gunfights. That's what
most
happened.
first of all,
They
2/3 of the
killed
people in this
millions of
country
people,
don't
man.
even have guns.
Hey,
The
I'm just telling
400
you the
million
truth,
guns
doctor.
that we have in this country are
Hey, man.
owned by about 39%
Mm.
of the people in this country. So it's not ingrained in the culture of this country. Come on.
How do you think we have 400 million guns if it's not
It's not ingrained in the culture
in
of
the
this
culture
country.
of this country?
Well,
It
well, it's
is.
ingrained.
It is, man.
It's ingrained. It's
You know,
ingrained.
hey, man.
It's ingrained in the ideology of people who think
You know, man,
and who think that it's the idea that you need to have a gun so that people won't do to them what they did to others. That's what that nonsense is about, and it's about somebody who just wants to continue to protect the proliferation of people getting wealthy at the carnage of other people. That's what it's about. It's not in the culture of the country.
You finished? You finished?
Yeah.
The slave catchers had guns. That's how they kept black people enslaved for hundreds of years, by using their guns. Guns are ingrained in the culture of this country. That's how it happened. So it's going to be almost impossible to get rid of them. We have to learn to live with them, because that's how this country was formed.
We don't have to
Forged
learn. We don't have to
in
learn to live with them.
gunfire.
We don't have to learn to live with
Forged
them.
in gunfire. You live with them.
Yeah. We
You
don't
live
have
with
to
them
learn.
right now.
I don't live
You
with
live
them.
with them.
I don't
You
live with
do.
them.
You
I don't
do.
live with them.
Man,
I don't
there's
have a
some
gun
re-
in my house
there's
and never will.
you don't have one in your house, but I tell
And
you
never
one
will.
thing, people around you have them. There's going to be somebody to stick a gun in somebody's face tonight, doctor.
Well, yeah,
Tonight,
well, you know,
to try to take
so
their car, man.
is that
This is
supposed
what
is that
this is
supposed to
what
just
America.
is that
No,
supposed to mean that we're not supposed to do anything about it? Well,
you
I
can
don't
do.
get where you're going
I'm,
with that.
I'm what I'm going with it is that we should find ways to live with this problem,
Oh, please.
then think we're going to get rid of the guns. And when you're not, 400 million guns, you're
We
going
should
to take
find
away
we
guns
should find
from
ways
law-abiding
we should
people,
find ways
and
to say to people it's
crooks are going to
okay
have their
for people
guns,
to
man.
have it's okay for people to have semi-automatic weapons, okay for people to have AR-15, it's okay for people to have AK-47s, when we know that we've had laws in place that have prevented the kinds of carnage that we've had 25 years ago. So we need to learn with it to live with it as it is now. That's the most ridiculous statement ever. Come on.
Do you think that there will come a time in this country when law enforcement will go house to house, require that people turn in their weapons, and they're going to come get them? I
Nobody
don't
is,
know.
no,
I mean,
no,
how do you
Charles,
plan to get rid
Charles,
of them?
please,
I mean,
please, Charles. I mean, you sound ridiculous. Really,
I'm
I'm
not
sorry.
sounding
You sound ridiculous because
man.
you're going to
Wait
the
a minute.
extreme.
Don't say. No, I'm
Because
asking
you
you a
do.
question.
No,
Well, how do you?
I mean,
how
it's a
do you get rid
ridiculous
of?
question.
But
It's a
no, here's the
ridiculous
question.
question.
No, it isn't a ridiculous question. If you have 400 million weapons in the United States owned by people, how do you pick them? How do you get them? How do you
Nobody's
collect?
saying, Charles,
How do
nobody
you
is
collect?
saying to go and take 400 million guns. What we're saying is, what reasonable people are saying, and 85% of the people in this country are saying, is that eliminate AR-15s,
Okay,
eliminate
okay.
AK-47, eliminate semi-automatic weapons. Police officers 35 years
Semi-automatic
ago.
weapons. That's a 9mm Glock pistol is a semi-automatic weapon. You gonna
Well,
take
you can
that?
you got semi-automatic rifles,
Okay,
you
you
got
can have
semi-automatic hand weapons.
you can have that. Okay.
No,
Okay.
do
Okay.
away with them as you did.
So
They were not allowed prior to the assault weapons ban, which expired in
semi-automatic weapons.
1995.
Oh no,
Yes, in
they took
1994.
no. You could buy a Glock 9mm Glock pistol after that bill you're talking about. That was for semi-automatic so-called assault weapons, long guns, not handguns. They're semi-automatic too. And then what they're doing, they're putting switches on them now that make them go brrr, like that. But that was never; those were never banned. The semi-automatic pistol was never banned. Okay.
We banned semi-automatic weapons that were banned
Long guns.
as however you want to label it, Charles.
Yeah. Well,
Semi-automatic weapons were banned, all right, in this country, and they had expired in 1994. It expired in 1994 under the Bush administration, and it has unleashed what we have happening in this country today. So we just
not
those of us who care about saving lives will continue to fight, and we have to vote to put people in place who will put the necessary policies in place that we can reverse this carnage. That's what we have to do. We have to make sure that we have the right people in place to do that. Period. We would be better off with having no guns. And I've been approached with a gun 3 times in my life, and I still won't own a gun. I won't have one in my house because the fact is that even if you own a gun, you are 3 times more likely to die with your own gun than you are for somebody else that's going to come in your house and attack and invade you, or the government is going to take you over. That kind of, ridiculous rhetoric just has no basis in truth. It doesn't. There's not you can't report, you can't point to a single report, a single study, any kind of facts that support the rhetoric.
Go out there and study. You go study, man. You said, so what I said was ridiculous. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
You wouldn't say that. You wouldn't say that if you were standing here.
Why wouldn't I?
Because that's not the way you have conversation with people.
Why wouldn't I say it's ridiculous?
But why would you do that? Why would you?
Because that's what I think of it.
But
because that's what I think of it. I think it's absolutely ridiculous for anybody to suggest that we need to have people with semi-automatic weapons, with AR-15s and AK-47s, and the only way that we could mitigate the problem is to do away with the Second Amendment. We don't have to do away with the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was around when we had the assault weapons ban. We didn't have the kind of carnage going on with semi-automatic weapons 30 years ago.
There are semi-automatic pistols and there are semi-automatic rifles. You have confused the two.
No, I haven't confused anything. I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about.
Semi-automatic pistols were never banned. Okay. A Glock 9mm is a semi-automatic pistol. It was never banned. The rifles, the long guns were banned, not the semi-automatic pistols. That's true, Mark.
Charles, whatever the case is, we had a ban on semi-automatic weapons and assault weapons in this country.
Assault weapons.
And we did not have the kinds of carnage that we have today.
Assault weapons.
That's a fact.
The 90s, man, there were more people murdered by handguns in the 90s than there are today. You don't know that?
We don't have. Look,
they had over 1,000 people murdered in Chicago in 1992. Man, in the 90s there were over 1,000. And this year we might make it to 600 or so. We might make it to 600. Homicides have gone down dramatically in Chicago, man.
Homicides are going down dramatically around the country because we're putting in sensible gun legislation that are protecting people from being able to just have such easily access to weapons. So we have to do more of that. We have to get tougher on it, and we have to continue to do the work to mitigate the availability of these weapons that people are getting unnecessarily in our society. Period. We just have to continue to do that work.
So we're coming up on 1 hour and 15 minutes, huh? That we've been at this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me move. I want to move on to. And speaking of that, the woman in where was she at? Her son killed 4 people. Jennifer Crumbly, convicted of involuntary manslaughter.
Who is that?
For that, this was the woman whose son killed 4 people in a high school, and I forget what state that was in. But his mother, his father, and his mother are both have been charged for involuntary manslaughter. His mother, Jennifer Crumbly, was convicted of involuntary manslaughter for neglecting multiple warning signs of her sons, even the day that he actually killed 4 students. She refused to take him home when the school had called them, and they saw him drawing a drawing of him or someone shooting other people in class. And they called his mother to take her home, but she was busy out with her having her affair with whoever that is that she was involved with, that she admitted to when she was being cross-examined.
Where did this happen?
I'm trying to remember what state that they were in.
Really?
I didn't write down the
You know,
state that it happened.
I tend to, you know, go past those kinds of salacious stories. I don't. To me, it's a waste of my time. I mean, might be different for you, but it's a waste of my time to read stuff like that. I don't
Well,
see
it's not.
what
It's not because it's the
you know,
problem. It's a
it's
problem
what?
where it is a problem when a high school student goes into a high school. You think it's it's a waste of time talking about a high school student who went into a school and slaughtered 4 students with a gun. That's a waste of time.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay, all right.
I
This
didn't think.
happened in Michigan. This happened in Michigan, where the parents bought their kid a gun, who obviously had some issues, and he went into a high school and killed 4 students. And his mother certainly had the chance to go and pick him up and take him home, and she refused to do so. And then when it happened, she and the husband started running around hiding in warehouses, claiming that they were afraid because they were getting death threats. But both of them she's been convicted, and the father is soon to be going to trial as well. And maybe this will have parents to start taking more responsibility about giving their children guns. I mean, it is just unimaginable to me that parents would give their children guns for recreation. Just crazy.
Yeah, if I at the risk of, I mean, it is crazy. I wouldn't give. How old was this kid?
I think it was 15.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of kids get their. I know a lot of uh, kids that live in rural areas. They get guns at a very young age, which is a tradition in many families in rural areas because I guess they grew up hunting, and it can go back really to uh, hundreds of years ago when they on the frontier. I mean, a kid was taught to use a gun at a very young age, and a lot
Hmm.
of them use them. A lot of them use them, and I wouldn't send my kid who grew up in an urban area a gun. That's just trouble. But in farm areas, yeah, man, those kids have guns, man. They learn how to use guns at a very early age. Definitely.
I saw another story on a better note. I saw a story this morning that I thought was pretty interesting. Have you ever heard of the Greystone Bakery
No.
in New York? So the
Mm-mm.
Greystone Bakery in New York, this was it was it was uh, created for the purposes of hiring people who wanted to work, that were not giving an opportunity to work. It was, I think it was founded in 1982, I believe it said, that it was. But anyway, he founded it. His name was Glassman. Founded Jerry Glassman founded it in 1982, and it was he founded it, and they provide the chocolate chips that go in Ben and Jerry's ice cream and these cupcakes, all over the country. But the people who work there, all the people who work there, are people who couldn't get hired. If you want a job to go there, they don't have any screening. There's no checking of your records or anything like that. People who want to work, who want to get a job, and they've been very successful. They have like 78 employees, and all of those employees are people who are what some would say unemployable. And he created this company just for the purposes to give an opportunity for these people who otherwise wouldn't have gotten employment. And it seems to be catching on because other companies are looking at that model and employing this model and employing people. And I think that this is a great thing that people we can look at all over this country, because the more that we could put people to work to be able to provide for themselves and give them some sense of worth, then we can eliminate poverty, we can eliminate violence and crime, or certainly reduce it from the levels that we see it happening in. And I just thought that was such a great story that I saw this morning on the news. It was refreshing to see that sort of thing. He said that they don't hire people to bake brownies. They bake brownies to hire people. I like that philosophy. So kudos to Mr. Glassman. And there's I think he has a brother who is now the president and CEO of the company. So I think that was a good thing. Another good story about a guy by the name of John Laster. He was a comedian out of New York who founded the app called Black. And this is an app for people who want to find Black businesses all over the country. And I think they have some 60,000 Black businesses that are in this directory. I'm going to download it and take a look at it. I just saw it just before we came on the air. John Laster out of New York, who founded this app to promote Black businesses all over the country. I think it's a great thing.
So how's your Black History Month coming along, man?
Black History Month is coming along great. We're going to have some people, some guests on, because I like to look at Black history from past and present. I like to look at people who are being history makers of today, who are breathing. We tend to talk a lot about dead history makers who certainly have done some profound things, and they certainly should be noted. But we have people who are doing great things today that we don't talk about. And so we've got some people who are running for public office, certainly some people who I have met, which are very few, but we got coming up in a couple of weeks, we're going to have some people on who is running for, that's currently a justice and running for re-election, who just brilliant. I mean, just brilliant people that I have come in contact with. So we'll be highlighting them and learning more about their paths and what it is that they're looking to do. Next week, we're going to be talking about, we're going to have some guests on from the reparations. It's the Conrad Worrell Reparations Committee. They're going to come on as guests and talk about, they got a big reparations meeting that's going to be taking place at the Trinity United Church of God over on 95th Street. So they're going to be our guest on next week. So that's going to be an interesting conversation to hear from some of the board members of that. But you know, Black history. You know, I love. I sit around and watch documentaries on PBS, learning about, and certainly relearning and learning about some of the history makers of the past. I was watching. Uh, I have not seen all of them. Have you seen all of the Eyes on the Prize? Have you seen all of them?
I saw it years ago. I mean,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I did. But
Okay.
what, any part of it in particular?
No, I was watching the ones where they were reminding us of where King had gone to, I think it was Albany, Georgia, and they uh, went there and demonstrated and got arrested. But the chief of police thought that because they couldn't afford to pay their bail, well, they didn't want to pay their bail because they wanted to sit there because they had been sentenced to 45 days in jail. And of course, the longer they were there, the more attention and the more this demonstration was building up, that the sheriff had reached out to some of his people and said, we need to, it would be better to have them released than to have them in jail. And so some mysterious donor, they don't know who it was, went and paid their bail so that they could be released because they thought that the movement um, would be would grow by having them in jail rather than having them released. I had not seen that part of the story of the movement. In fact, that there was an order that came from the attorney general that said that they could not demonstrate there in Albany, and so they went from Albany to Montgomery, which is where they said that the movement really got its legs. So it was pretty interesting watching that on this past. I watched that on Saturday. Went to the movies on Sunday, on Super Bowl Sunday, when you all were sitting there watching um, the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I watched the Super Bowl, man. There's no way I would miss the Super Bowl. When you told me that you were going to the movies, I said, "My man, you know, you this is an event, the Super Bowl. I mean, it's a
Yeah, the Slave
holiday.
Bowl.
The
Yeah,
Slave Bowl. Why you say that?
yeah. Well, that's what I think of it.
Why
That's what I
Slave
think of
Bowl?
it.
Why
That's just
Slave
what I
Bowl?
think of it. That's what I think of the NFL.
Really? They did
Yeah,
get slavery, huh? Those guys
yeah,
make millions of dollars, man. They get paid. They're professional
yeah.
football players,
Hmm.
man.
Yeah,
I like the game. I like football,
yeah.
and
Hmm.
it's an intriguing
Hey, I
game to
like
me.
the game
I
too. I
don't,
used to play it.
but you don't watch the best
No,
in the world play the game.
no,
You don't.
no,
Why?
no.
Because of
I haven't watched football since 2016. I've just, I've lost it certainly for the NFL. I watch college football. I
really,
watch
I don't
college
like college
football.
football.
Yeah,
I
I
can't
watch
keep up
college
with it.
football.
Yeah, you're angry at the NFL. Is it
I
anger
I wouldn't say that
or
I'm
what?
angry at the NFL. I just,
Disgust?
they just
Disgust?
the owners. Well, you can call it that, whatever adjective you want to put
Angry.
on it. But
Yeah, I'm not that angry
so
in life,
you
man.
know, yeah.
I don't. I
No,
remember
I
the.
look,
I
I don't spend
remember
my
the.
time being angry. I don't spend my time being angry at the NFL. I just
But
don't pay attention to it.
you don't pay attention to. Yeah, I pay
No.
attention to it. I
Yeah.
don't. I'm not obsessed with it. I don't know all the statistics. I know I got my favorite players. I mean, I spent. I began my career in journalism in Kansas City, and
Mm.
I lived in Kansas City for I guess 6 years. Both my offspring were born in Kansas City. I like Kansas City. And anytime any sport comes up and Kansas City's playing, if it's not the Chicago Bears or the White Sox, I'm with Kansas City. I'm always with Kansas. And I lived in San Francisco for
Hmm.
5 years.
Yeah.
But Kansas City has a place in my heart. And I know that those people really appreciate the fact that their team is so good these days, and that they have a mini dynasty of sorts going on there. And it's a lot of, I guess, a lot of side stories that are going on in Kansas City too.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't like them because they win so much, but
Well,
I
that
like
that
Kansas
tends to
City.
happen. Tends to happen to a team that just dominates, right? But I'm happy for the brother, for Mahomes, that he
Now
was
stop,
successful.
stop it.
Mhm.
We're going to take a tangent here. Patrick Mahomes. I've seen his father. I've seen his mother.
Mhm.
Is he white? Is he white or black?
I don't know what he identifies as,
I
but
don't either. I never asked him, but you said
all I hear is people calling him black, the black president. I mean, the
I
black
know.
quarterback.
In fact,
But
they call Barack
I've
black.
never heard him say that one way or the other, but
I
they
know.
refer
I
to
know.
him as the black president. I mean, the black quarterback.
Yeah.
So that's why I said that.
What do you think would happen? I want you to just mute. I don't want you to take offense or get defensive or go off on a Mark Wallace. What do you think would happen
I'm gonna
in
always
the?
be Mark Wallace.
I know, but I don't want you to get
I'm gonna
emotional
always be
because
Mark Wallace.
you tend to get emotional.
Unapologetic.
You start calling me names and things.
You went silent, Charles. You went silent. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Your mic is blocked. Unmute your mic. It says that your mic is muted.
Got it. You hear me now, right? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Here's the phenomenon. What do you think would happen in the United States if suddenly the government came up with a category for people like Patrick Mahomes and said that from now on out in the United States, we're going to have what's called a mixed race category? How do you think that dynamic, what would be the dynamics of that? If suddenly there was a line that said not black, white, Asian, American, Latino, but mixed race.
I guess that would be all of us. If the government if the government can tell somebody where they're going to, what their place is, where the government can say this, can tell you what your ethnicity is or what your race is.
No, we would self-identify still, but if colleges and universities or equal employment guidelines, there was suddenly a category called mixed race. How
That
do
the
you
government assigned to some person?
Well, right now, no. You would self-identify. You would say what you are. But if you had to be mixed race and not black or white, how do you think that would affect just life in general in the United States? We're going to talk reparations soon. How do you think it would affect reparations? Any movement toward reparations? It's something to think about, because a lot of people who are mixed race will identify as black or identify as white, but they are mixed race. Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback in Kansas City, is mixed race. Barack Obama is mixed race.
Who is not mixed race?
Who is not? I don't know. You'd self-identify. But would that take you out of the game when it comes to reparations? Would it?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Would you be mixed race?
No, I'm as black as they come.
I could do mixed race if I wanted. I grew up black. My mama was black. My daddy was black. We were black. I got discriminated against at times because I was black, because the society called me black. But how would that affect official America? And I'm not talking about black and white black people mixed with white people. I'm talking about an Italian mixed with a Japanese or so forth. I mean, because that is becoming the new America, is becoming that.
Hmm.
They say that white people by the year, I think it's 2050, will be a minority in the United States. Might happen sooner than that if this immigration thing continues the way it's going. But how will that affect everything, particularly as it pertains to what we're today calling black people?
Well, I guess I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding how the context that you're using this,
Well,
or
the
you're
context.
posing it.
Well, the context is, I think it's a conversation that black people have to have at some point in the next few years, because we're approaching this era where, I mean, does Patrick Mahomes qualify for reparations, or someone who is half black and half white qualify for reparations? It does.
Well, look, for me, um, it's as simple as this: his father is black. If he identifies as black, his father would qualify for reparations. Then Patrick Mahomes would qualify for reparations. That's pretty simple to me. There are people, what's his name? Um, Lewis, that does the Finding Your Roots, right? And
Gates.
he's Lewis Gates, and he sits there and he does this genealogy um, forensics and find that people have Indians, Europeans, this, that, or the other in their lines. Man, look, there are many slaves who had children with the enslaved. So, you know, um, I I don't think that we should be even worried about splitting those hairs.
Oh
If
yeah, we have to worry
if
about splitting those
let,
hairs
well,
if
let
we're
me
going to talk
finish,
about
Charles.
reparations.
Listen, if your mama or your daddy is black and you come from your mama or your daddy, far as I'm concerned, uh, you get reparations. I
You
mean,
know,
I'm not. I just don't think that we should be splitting those kind of hairs, because when you start talking about that, then what about all of the people that go way back? I think my great grandmother was white. I think my mother's grandmother was white.
yeah,
So,
my, yeah, right, right.
you know,
You know, the real,
my father's father was an Indian.
the one of the real ironies of this conversation is that we talk about racism, that one of the most sordid vestiges of chattel slavery was this whole business of a white slave owner raping a black slave. He wanted to be sure that that offspring was a slave. It was an economic motivation on that slave owner's part to make that child a slave. Your own flesh and blood, man. I mean, it's awful to think that these guys, these slave owners,
Hmm.
fought like that. They would enslave their own child.
Well, many of them
And
had children for that purpose.
exactly. So we have a situation where uh, black people, our numbers in this country,
if there were a mixed race category and some people claimed it, our numbers would reduce dramatically in this country, because there would be some people who are 50-50 who would say, oh, I'm white, I'm not black, or I'm mixed race, I'm not black. And so that would reduce our numbers dramatically in this country, politically as well as socially. If there are 40 million black people in the United States now, if you had 5 to 10 million of them all of a sudden say, well, I'm mixed race, or some of them even say I'm white, and there are some who could do that, man, our numbers would be reduced dramatically, man, which would, I think,
Maybe they would be increased. Maybe they would be increased.
People claiming to be black.
Yes. Maybe it goes the other way.
I don't know, man. In this country,
I mean,
it's possible. And
it's
possible.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it that way,
Yeah.
but it certainly
Because
would,
you got some people. I'm sure that there is somewhere that there is a mixed race person that does not identify with their darkness, because they pass for 100% in the esoteric, that for all intents and purposes, they appear to be white.
yeah.
Everything, physically, I should say, as to how we define white, they appear to be white. I'm sure that there are people, even today, I know that black people did it, back then for safety reasons. But
Let me tell you something. My grandmother on my mother's side did that. She got a job at a downtown department store in St. Louis, because on the floor selling stuff, because she passed for white, and she would go home to her black family every day, but she would go to work and be a white woman because they didn't let black people work on the main floor selling stuff. So she passed, but a lot of people passed too. Well, it's a famous film by
your grandmother.
My grandmother on my mother's side. Now,
okay.
There's a famous film by Oscar Micheaux, who was a black filmmaker in the 1920s, who did a film about black people passing. This is an old talkie, as they called it,
Yeah.
but it's been something that's been around black folks for as long as we've been around. This whole notion of passing for white. But I just think that as we have the conversation, and we'll talk about it when we talk about reparations, that how are we going to determine who qualifies and who identifies, and how do you prove that a person is in fact black? I mean, reparations is filled with all kinds of pitfalls and pratfalls, and whether or not that ever happens, to my way of thinking is, if y'all give reparations, man, holla at your boy, okay? But I'm not gonna sit around and wait on it, because it's it's a tough thing. But I gotta think.
See, I think that reparations has to start locally, because most of the national policies come from local local governments, right? That have started policies locally, then statewide, and somebody, advocates for that to become national policy. So I think that the way that we do certainly go at it, and I've talked to people who are a part of that Conrad Worrell reparations, that in Chicago, in Cook County in Illinois, we build the block that I'm talking about, we can advance reparations much faster.
Well, there's a I think in the budget, the Brandon Johnson's budget, I think there's like $500,000 or something like that to study reparations. Now in California, they actually studied it and said, yeah, we should do this, but California is like $30 billion in debt. deficit. So
Well, the
it's not
country is
gonna.
in debt when it comes to reparations. The country is in debt to us when it comes to reparations, for that matter.
Yeah.
But
But
but what I'm saying to you, look, reparations has been done with the Japanese. It's been done with Jewish people. There's been reparation that have been done, and we're going to talk about that next week. And I'll bring more information about that when we actually are having that conversation. But
one other thing I just want to bring up is that a lot of the people in this country who oppose reparations, I mean, oppose it with a zeal,
mhm,
are immigrants. They don't understand why they should have to pay for anything that these European settlers did over 150 years ago.
uh-huh.
You know, that goes back to the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about Nikki Haley saying there is no racism. Well, she don't believe there is, because there
Uh-huh.
isn't to her. To her group, it
well,
isn't. But
okay.
or they don't care about it. But
That's more that she doesn't believe
yeah,
it.
well,
That
but
they just don't care about it because of their own agenda. So, but we're not going to get into that debate.
but Venezuelans don't care about it either. I mean, you know,
Okay, so what? Who
the whole
cares?
bit.
I don't care that they don't care.
Well,
I don't care that
yeah,
they don't care.
but they're going to be voting. They're going to be making the decisions that
Wait
affect
a minute.
reparations.
You're talking about people who are not citizens here?
But they're going to be voting sooner or later.
No. I'm not even worried. I'm not
their
even worried.
kids, their kids
I'm
are
not
going to be
worried about
voting.
We're not
Their
worried
kids
about
are going
them.
to.
We're not
I'm
worried about
worried
them.
about it. I'm
We're not
worried
worried about
about it. Hey man, if people vote, they can vote.
Venezuelans,
Their kids can vote.
or
Their
whoever
kids can
that
vote,
is not a
man.
citizen here, those are not the people that we have to be concerned about resisting reparations.
That I disagree.
That's the least of
But
our worries.
I disagree. I disagree.
Well, they're not in legislative
I
positions
disagree.
to make
But man,
decisions or
but
vote.
they will be, Mark.
Okay,
They
all
will
right.
be.
Well,
Their
look,
kids will be.
I'm not even concerned about that.
I am. I'm
certainly
concerned about it.
we can certainly outnumber that. But, you know, we can certainly
Oh, you can outnumber that. Well, you know, I don't know about
we can
that, man.
outnumber that, and certainly we can out legislate that nonsense. But you know, they can be opposed to it all they want to. Listen, there's a lot of white folks who are benefiting still to this date from slavery. They're benefiting from all of the work that the slaves and our ancestors has built, the wealth that they are enjoying to this date, that's are opposed to reparation. So what? So
Although
what?
I'm talking about this day that all the demographers are predicting that in 10, 15 to 20 years, white people will be a minority in America. Black people will be the fourth or fifth ranking minority.
Do you know
in
that white
America.
people are the minority in
And
South
so, no, but
Africa?
Mark, you interrupted me again. Okay. White people will be a minority. Black people will be fourth or fifth, maybe. You'll have subgroupings of Asians that will outnumber Black people. Chinese, uh, Indians. Indians are the number one per household group when it comes to income in the United States. White people are like fourth or fifth. We are going to be asking for reparations from a country that is non-white, that will not be a white majority. There will be other people of color will be the majority, and we will have to ask them for reparations. And that's going to be a tricky maneuver, because
I
they're
don't
going to
think so.
say, I ain't got nothing to do with that. They
I don't
enslaved
think
my
so.
people back in India, where they have a caste system. They enslaved my people back in China, wherever they came from. And we're going to be sitting there going, please. And they're going to say, what? Oh, no. We got to really think about that. If we're going to do
Yeah.
it, we better do it soon.
Yeah. Well, I think that we have a pathway to certainly being examples in places like Chicago, places like Philadelphia, places like Detroit that can be models of reparations, where we have large concentrations of Black people that can determine elections. And that is how I believe that we will advance our agendas, period. But before we get too far on, I read something today. I don't know if you saw this. Don Harmon has what it seems like that he's capitulated to Lori Lightfoot to adopting this House proposal to now not have all school board members elected, but to only have 10 elected and 10 appointed by the mayor. I got this email today, and but I'm not
Now,
surprised.
how many would be elected?
10. There's a total of 20.
Right.
There would be 10 elected and 10 appointed by the mayor. I
Yeah.
want for the school board to be out of the mayor's hand. Ever since Daley has taken over the public schools, it has done nothing but go down, down, down. I want it away from the mayor. It has no business being in the hands of the mayor. In fact, when Daley got the General Assembly to pass the law, it was only temporary. It was not supposed to be permanently. It was supposed to be temporarily. So, but I just learned of this before we came on the air. So I certainly want to look further into that. But I'm just saying it is so clear to me that it is essential. And boy, we had a good meeting last week. We had like almost double the number of people we had before, and hopefully it'll keep growing. We had 46 people in our meeting last week, and people seem to be getting energized. But and obviously we got a long ways to go, but we can get there if we work hard at it. But it is clear to me that we have to dominate. We have to dominate. We cannot just sit around and have these niceties to wait for anybody who is in public office, Black, white, Republican, Democrat, male or female. Black people have to be acutely focused on mobilizing ourselves together to dominate the political spectrum.
Excuse me, Mark. Hey, Mary, you're on the podcast. Mary,
Why would you bring that?
Mary, you're on the podcast. You're in the back. Okay, cool. I'm sorry, man, but I had to take my baby out the game here.
But nobody was paying attention, but you.
I was paying attention.
But see, I was trying to hope that you would just stay focused, because man, you went right there. But look, when you leaned in, you covered it up. So you should have just stayed there.
I tried to cover it up. I tried, but anyway, man, I feel you. I was actually listening. I was actually listening, but I can understand why these politicians are very upset about what could be a 21-member school board, elected school board, because they know that if that is the case, that CTU is going to rule an elected school board. They're going to use their political power to control the school board, which is going to be the other piece. They've got the mayor's office now, but they will give up the mayor's office and the mayor's control of the school board, because they're going to have it in the elected process. I mean, they're going to sponsor candidates, and their candidates, I would bet you now, are going to win election. And I think a lot of politicians and a lot of the people who support people like Don Harmon are very concerned about giving up their control, political control, to CTU. I mean, it's like sort of like an intra-party fight in the Democrat Party, where CTU, which is already made a power move on City Hall, will sort of complete the deal and control, what is it, 10 to 15 billion dollars a year that flows through CTU. They're going to control that totally if they control the school board. I mean, there's a lot going on there, a lot going on. And I can imagine the people who are talking to not only Don Harmon, but also to Chris Welch about this elected school board, because they seem to be backing off from it in official Springfield. Would you agree
Well,
that they aren't as committed as they were maybe a year ago?
in Springfield?
Yeah, they aren't
Oh,
committed to
absolutely.
the elected school board as much as they were.
This is exactly what was emailed to me, that Don Harmon, this is what he is seems to be supporting. I don't agree with this idea that if we have an elected school board that it's going to be controlled by the CTU. Now, with that theory, just going along with that theory, I think it's more likely that if the mayor is appointing 10 people on the school board and there are only 10 elected, that gives more weight to that theory to me, if in fact that was the case. I think that we are better off with an elected school board, that the mayor's office has nothing to do with managing the Chicago public schools, period.
Brandon Johnson is not going to be the mayor forever. He might not make it to another term. And I think people—
I don't care who the mayor is.
Well, don't interrupt me. Brandon Johnson will not be the mayor forever. And whatever they're doing in Springfield, they're thinking about above and beyond, or beyond Brandon Johnson, and who controls that 10 to 15 billion dollars that the school board spends every year, that the board of CPS spends. That's— follow the money, and you'll find out what the play is. Because these people clearly don't care anything about the kids. Because if they did, things would be a lot different. They're talking about, other things as well, but follow the money. The 10 to 15 billion dollars is what Daley wanted to control, or whatever the amount was then. And I believe that's what they're talking about now.
Well, look, here's what we have to do. We have to get, we've got to get ourselves organized so that we can take control of these people who are trying to control the resources for the benefit of some other people. That's what we have to do. I don't care who the mayor is, whether it's Brandon or whoever comes after him. We have got to take it out of their hand. Got to take it out of the speaker's hand, the General Assembly. We have got to take control of the destiny of our communities. We have to do that. We have to do that. And we've got to— the side that we have to take is our side. That's what we have to get to, is taking our side, not jumping on somebody else's side, but let's get on our side, get ourselves together so that we could be a threat to any of them, that if they don't want to deliver, we'll move them aside to put people in place who can deliver, to make sure that there's real equity and a functioning governing body, not this, what we have today. Doesn't work, hasn't worked, and is not going to work for Black people. And they don't intend for it to work for Black people, including the Black people that are there.
Man, you sound like me, man.
No,
You
I'm
sound
sounding
like
like me.
Yeah, that's how I said, but you
Because
sound—
I've been saying that all the time.
Well, I mean, I'm a proponent of school choice, and dismantling the system, school choice, as a means to dismantle the public education system in Chicago because it doesn't work and it's rife with corruption. If you have school choice and that money does not go down to CPS downtown to the board and it goes to locally controlled schools, parents can have control again of what their children are learning and the budgets of individual schools, as opposed to pouring all this money downtown that never finds its way to the classroom. But that's a conversation for another day, because it is
Yeah.
8:59, which gives you 1 minute to wrap up.
Yeah. So that conversation, that you and I were talking about Snelling, he made a statement that their clearance was 76% clearance rate for January, when they only cleared three. They cleared 3 cases from the year, with 16 other cases that were not cleared. I mean, come on. I mean, how do you make that stupid mistake?
I know because they thought they were pulling a fast one until we caught them and CWB Chicago caught them, and that's good journalism. That's
Yes.
good journalism, and hats off to them. Although they do some things I don't agree with, but that was good journalism.
Yeah.
Hey man,
Well, that's what journalism is supposed to do. It's supposed to
Supposed to
hold
be.
people accountable.
right.
All right, Charles. Well, that's going to do it for us. Listen, we'll be talking about doing some a couple of special things like we're trying to do today. But there's some interesting conversations that we have to have with some people, I think, that the audience is going to really enjoy. I want to thank all of you all for joining us tonight. Mark Wallace and Charles Thomas, right here every Monday night on intellectualradio.com, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We love being here with you every Monday night from 7 o'clock till 9. And we look forward to being with you the same time, same place next week. Be safe.
See you next week. Oh. Mark, we gone yet?